More chairs up there for I'll turn this on and get out of the way. So that's it.
So we only have one resolution.
Yes, it's really the presentation. How are you? Excellent. How are the Eagles doing on Sawkill?
No, I haven't been by there.
I was a little anxious that the paving by the county had maybe upset them. Because they disappeared. I saw them back, or at least one of them.
But they the Eagles decided to build where they built.
Yeah.
Just drag it there. There's Eagles.
Yeah, should be, right?
Oh,
No, the sign he's got right there.
I got you.
there's Eagles over the car wash.
Right. It's all what you're used to. Where?
Sounds like it's
Nice.
Is this a spare?
Back on the, that's Reggie's, back on the file cabinets by Mike.
Summer cut. Summer cut.
Chemo. Chemo. So it's all falling out. So it's just got off. Good day. Other than the hair falling out, other.
Okay, well, good luck with everything. So, yeah, good to see you.
And you didn't meet in person. I didn't meet you had here a year ago. A little screen, you know, it's hard to see.
I don't know about you, I use the
Oh, okay. No, I don't know, yeah.
So I probably don't actually need my laptop because it's all the present, well, I guess I will with the
If you
presentation.
want to see.
Yeah, but actually if it's on my laptop, I can look straight through it.
Terry Ann, I see you online there. Can you hear us okay? You're smiling.
Yes, I can hear you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, we can't hear you too good. Hi, Reggie. Terry, can you talk again so we can hear if the volume is better?
Are you asking me?
Yeah, okay, that's better.
When do they want it on the agenda?
They just want to do it whenever, because I mean, you know, the shed is already here.
Right.
Okay.
And they did
Yeah.
it. Yeah, okay, excellent. Thank you. Yeah, appreciate it.
Yes.
There were two things. I didn't put them on the agenda because I only got them, we sent them out this morning. We have those on for next meeting. That's great.
Next meeting, 1 week or 2 weeks.
I mean, I know,
2 weeks.
I know that they're just eager to move that shed that's already there. You know what I mean?
If everybody's comfortable with that one.
Yeah, everybody, they walked it and they submitted their
Yeah,
okay.
I saw that. I meant everybody on the board. You're good?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll just have a quick resolution.
Do that, yeah, if we did that one, it would be great.
This is the entire agenda.
That's it. But it's basically, it's the presentation. And we're just going to add a quick resolution.
Famous last words.
True.
There's somebody familiar with Woodstock.
So I'm going to call to order the May 9th meeting of Woodstock Town Board. I have one quick announcement, I think Laura does. May 20th, there'll be a cleanup effort by the newly established Rotary Club. It will be on the 20th from 10 to 2. They asked that folks meet at the community center. And if you want more information or want to sign in, you can contact the supervisor's office at 845-679-2113, extension 17. And Laura, I think you had a quick announcement
Yeah,
about.
I did. So I wanted to mention the library. I see Jeff is here, so if I miss anything, Jeff, I hope you jump in. The library is having an event this coming Saturday from noon to 4, and it's a preview party. So it's at 10 Dixon Avenue at the new library site. It's also a 1-year anniversary since the people of Woodstock passed the bond for the new library. And they will be offering, they believe at this point, they'll be able to offer some short tours. And there are going to be some animals there and some music. So come on out and see the new library at 10 Dixon Avenue from noon to 4 this coming Saturday.
Just to be clear, it's the new library before we do the demolition. So it's not.
Thank you. So it's the before. You'll see the before. Yeah, you'll see the before picture, because during the demolition, you will not be having a tour of the library. So this is the before picture, and we'll get an after picture after the work is done.
Okay, with that, I will turn it over to the Housing Task Force. Thank you, guys. So leading off, Deborah?
Share screen.
Yeah, I think Jeff needs to share the screen. I think Jeff needs to.
Yeah, that's good. It's got it. There we go.
Yay.
You could make that little window with those people when it disappear.
Yeah, Bill, do you know how to do that? We can hit the small
Yeah, go up there and do the minimize.
Up on the screen, you can
mouse.
do it up on the screen.
I see it, I see it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then this way you get to go away all together, right?
You can drag that up. There you go.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
On either side.
Find it again.
Yeah, it's hard to say.
We'll come back up when he comes down to the
Okay.
Or it
I'm
should.
just trying to figure out where.
I think the best place to stand for the camera, if you want the camera, is about right here.
Yeah.
And then, and then Bell said, right? And so-
Right.
And then,
Well, you don't really need to see me. We're hoping that you're going to
right, right.
listen to what we have to say and look at our slides and have an opportunity to really experience on a deeper level the work of the Housing Oversight Task Force. So I just really want to start by thanking the town board for giving us the opportunity. We submitted all of our documents, which included a draft of the subdivision and zoning updates, the law that you have to put into a formal process. But it also included a set of other documents that we prepared for the community and for all of you to really understand what we've been working on, how it can help our community, how it reflects the comprehensive plan that was adopted in 2018. And so that was the start of this next phase. I'm going to talk about some of the things related to getting more information and more conversation going about our proposals in the coming weeks. So in addition to tonight, I just want to let you all know that the Woodstock Housing Committee, some of whom are here, are hosting a community meeting on May 30th at the community center, 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. And that's another opportunity for folks to come out to learn more about the proposals and to be in conversation. And so we really welcome everyone to come, and we're really looking forward to that. Also,
Thank you.
oh, well, thank the Housing Committee. This is a,
You guys have
So,
done a fantastic
I'm on the
job.
Housing Committee, and I guess in a moment, we'll talk a little bit about who all is here from the task force and some folks, a former Housing Committee member. So, and this is a good segue because we started this journey with the comprehensive plan in 2018, which designated housing as a really important need that this community has and was lacking, as well as the need to protect our environment. And the Housing Committee was appointed from the comprehensive plan, along with other committees, to specifically look to bring opportunity for housing that Woodstockers can afford into reality. And that took a number of forms. One of them was identified as zoning. We needed to look at our land use code and to bring it up to date, to look for ways we can both enhance the environment and provide housing opportunities. So I just want to say one other thing about the coming weeks. We've talked about providing the town board with the documents. The documents are also on the town website. They're available to everyone. And if you have any problems accessing them, I would say call the supervisor's office and they can sort of guide you through that process. Also, there is an email there for comments, and a comment period effectively began when the town board accepted the draft laws on April 18th. And we'll talk more about the process later on. So our mission as a task force, when we came together, was basically came out of the comprehensive plan to make housing more available to people with a range of incomes. So we really, and backgrounds, while preserving the town's character and scale and continuing to protect our treasured natural environment. So that's a really nice statement. So the challenge for us is how do we do this? And so we set about, next slide. So we set about creating an action plan to help us to achieve that goal. And we were fortunate with the help of the Housing Committee to get a Greenway grant and hire Nan Stolzenberg, whom you'll hear from during the evening. And really, she helped us get right to work. So I'm gonna interrupt myself because I feel like I need to introduce a few folks today. So we have essentially the whole task force here, I think, unless Richard's online. Judy Kerman from the planning board, Kirk Ritchie, who co-chairs the task force with me, Jeff Collins and Michael Castiglione, and who's on the ZBA and the Zoning Revisions Committee. And everybody serves on some other committee associated with housing. And that's kind of how we wound up coming together to take on this task.
Don't forget Richard.
Richard, I did mention him, but I don't see him, so I'm assuming he's online.
Yeah, I'm here too.
And Laura Ricky. I did this the last time. I forgot Kirk and Karen. So we're a 7-member group. And we got right to work. Basically, with Nan's guidance, looking at the existing laws, looking at best practices for land use today in the 21st century to incorporate a whole host of ways to address both the housing crisis and protecting environmental resources and how we could bring those together. So we looked at our laws, we looked at other tools that were available to us. We did some GIS mapping analysis to look at the whole of Woodstock. And you'll see this in some of the additional documents that are available on the website, how we went about that, so we could see what are the most environmentally sensitive areas in town, what are the areas where housing potentially could, what areas could provide for additional housing, multifamily housing, and that helped to guide us toward some direction for how to prepare these zoning codes. So the other thing we did very early on in that first 6 months is we had a lot of conversations. We talked with virtually every segment of the community. We talked with workers for the town. We talked in workers in town. We talked with people at the library. We talked to professionals. We talked with nonprofits and also a variety of boards and committees in the town to really get their input. Talk about the housing crisis, how they viewed it, what are some things that would help us to bring about the kind of solutions that we needed that fit our town. So all of that led us to working again with Nan to produce what we all call version 1, which we presented to the town board almost exactly 1 year ago on May 31st, 2022. And that was a great process for us, both in terms of having accomplished a significant amount of work, but also it gave us an opportunity to share what we had heard from people, what we had found out, and then begin the process to get comments that we could then assess and figure out what would be the best course of for us to take to produce something that would be valuable to the community. And so we did that over the next number of months, and we actually developed we analyzed everything we heard, every written comment we got, and we tried to incorporate those questions, concerns, and ideas into our process so that we could revise the work we did and come up with something that was even better. And here, pardon? Yeah, so once we did all of that, that brought us to a version 2, which was a result of all that analysis and looking at the comments and discussing a direction of things that would make it better, things that didn't fit into zoning, and we started developing a list of those things, which are non-zoning policy recommendations, which we will be sharing with the town. And those are things that are important, and many people commented about those things. And we just want you to know that we took all of that into consideration, and nothing was discarded. So everything is there for for consideration. And once we had a draft of version 2 with Nan's guidance, we reached out to John Lyons, who's a land use lawyer who does work for the Woodstock Planning Board, and asked him to review our revised draft as a draft law before we brought it to the town board and to the community. And he did a very detailed review. We also brought it to the Ulster County Planning Board for an informal review before any public process. They had already seen version 1 and had comments on that, but now we were closer. And so we wanted them to give us feedback and to see if there was any red flags, anything that didn't seem to make sense. They've obviously worked with Woodstock for years and years, and so we really appreciated the conversation we had with them. And so with that, we took all of that information in. It did result in some tweaks, and that enabled us to produce the draft law that we provided to you on April 18th. I'm going to turn it over to Kurt, who will have a little different perspective on it.
We're gonna be doing a little up and down today. So it's the beginning of that. It's good to see everyone. Thanks for coming out. I know some of you are here for other things later, but maybe not. This is the only thing tonight, right? So
You never know.
But anyway, thanks for being here. Appreciate it. And thank you for having us once again. Tonight, we're going through a little bit more detail than we did a quick run on the 18th. One of the things I just wanted to speak to is that, the outcome of this effort has a human quality to it, has a human side to it. And that people side of it is that we want to build housing so that people who live, stay here, or who they've been displaced, they can come back. And that focuses on work. Our workers here, our volunteers here, our firefighters here, our EMTs here, and those who volunteer. And then we also need the people who work for this town to live here, to be able to live here. And that's all that this effort is about, that as well. Young families. I mean, we all know today the news we heard this last week about our school potentially being closed. That's because we don't have young families living here. And so we need housing for our young families. We can keep that school if we do that, right? And so that's the effort that we're trying to make here. And this is just the first step of that, is to allow there to be the type of housing that can allow middle-class people and people with families and people just starting out in their lives with their families to have a place to live in our town. And ideally, that's walkable for the children to get to the school, right? So that's another big area of importance for us. There's seniors. I mean, let's face it, there's a lot of us, and we're not always going to be able to live in the houses that we live in, right? We're going to want to downsize. And many people that live in this town that are older can't sell their home and downsize because they have to leave this town. We can't afford anywhere to live, there's nowhere to go. So we need housing for those people that can help them stay where their home is and be here. And ideally be in a position where they can easily gain access to the necessities of their life, like shopping for food, going to the shops in the village, and being able to gain access to their community of friends and neighbors, right? All of that is important to seniors as much as it is for all of us, right? And then two, all of that effort rolls into the preservation and conservation of the environment while we do this. Many of us think that housing and development of housing and the environment are in conflict. And in truth, they have been, and that's why we think that. Many communities approach it like it's, you know, one or the other. And we have sought out in our efforts in the code to create, and you'll gain access to this as we go into the details, to seek harmony for when there is housing development, that the environment is maintained as a priority. And how we try to execute on that as we go into the details. So that's good. And the other thing I wanted to state is that this is the beginning. The code, the zoning code is like the first step to what we need to do. And it's going to take everybody. It's going to take private enterprise. It's going to take public efforts from the government and other efforts like say from grants and such. And it's going to take community investment. It's going to take each of our investments so that it's going to take the community. And that's what this code is enabling to bring about, is that. And so, you know, that I think that's it for me for now.
Well,
And I'm going to disappear.
just say
Yeah,
one
Judith,
thing.
please.
The way that this slide is on the screen, you can't see the very important bottom sentence. Affordable housing requires private, public, and community investment.
Right,
This is just the foundation for being able to do it.
excellent. This is why we invited the task force members here.
And I was just saying, they've been working on these slides for the last 3 or 4 days, and we missed the fact that the margins were a little narrow.
So Judy, you're telling me it's not going to be all resolved tonight?
You mean the slide?
No magic.
No, the problem.
Right, so we do have a very engaged task force, and so we are hoping if they are have something to add, please speak up. And we also want to invite Nan to give us any of her experience and wisdom on and also experience of us, but also the wisdom that she brought to our process from her years of working on both environment and land use planning. I just was one thing I forgot to mention earlier. I mentioned a few times about the comprehensive plan. There's a direct connection between a town adopting a comprehensive plan and a town having zoning updated. Zoning must be consistent with a comprehensive plan if the town has a comprehensive plan. State municipal law, section 272A, is that right? Okay, with my policy hat on. And it's really important. It doesn't mean that we throw everything away. It means that we build on what we have. We take a look at where we are, and then we also take a look at where we want to go. And the comprehensive plan helps us look at where we want to go. And so that's really key. And so I just invite you all to keep that in mind as you're reading through the documents and as you're listening tonight, and to help you understand what this process really represents. I think for me as a professional and having worked in the planning world myself, that this is one of the most exciting things to be doing this in my own community. And to work with professionals and great citizens who've given so much of their time. So this shows you, so the other thing, we always talk about the zoning code, the zoning code. There's the zoning code and the subdivision code. They both address land use. They have different functions, but they work together. And so the zoning code, which you're all familiar perhaps with that map up on the left, or some version of that. I think that's the town map. I don't think that it's one that we created. So that defines what how and how much can be put on the land. And so, and we'll talk more about the specifics. And the subdivision code really defines how the land can be divided. And Woodstock, actually, before it had a zoning code, it had a subdivision code. Very many rural communities do that. They have subdivision codes. More and more of them also have zoning, but that's more common. And so, but in order to satisfy the mission of the Housing Oversight Task Force and our work, both sets of the code had to be addressed. Now, this doesn't mean that we rewrote the entire code. So again, I just want to be clear. We took parts of it, and you'll hear about how we pulled them together because they're related to housing. And then we looked at specific aspects of it. And we did, I think, did a pretty good job of going through the law. And if we found something that was not particularly relevant to housing, but, well, gee, this is something the town ought to look at, maybe the zoning revision committee. So we've set aside these, what we call housekeeping items. But we didn't, so of the, what is it? 300 and some odd pages of the zoning and subdivision code, only a fraction of that is new or different. And so again, I just invite you to, there's a number of documents you'll hear about that will help you go through that. But I thought it might be useful, Nan, if I could ask you to just mention one of the ways that the two zoning and subdivision might work together in the way that we're addressing housing.
Yeah, so the subdivision law in and of itself applies the rules of the zoning. So if the zoning says in a certain district that a parcel of land is eligible for 5 lots, the zoning says how many lots are available, what the dimensions would be, what the rule, what are allowed, what land uses are allowed on those lots. And the subdivision really then keys in and looks at how those lots are actually created on that parcel. So the subdivision really implements the rules that are set in the zoning law. So they're completely tied together, and the zoning really sets the rules in the subdivision, is really more process oriented about what's the process that you go through to subdivide the lots and apply those rules in the way to meet the policies of the town.
So you'll see, and this is a good example of where something that we're proposing, recommending strongly that the town adopt a conservation subdivision regulation for major subdivisions is something that you'll see in both the zoning and the subdivision sections. And they complement one another.
Just for clarity, a major subdivision is 5 lots made on an existing parcel. So you might think it's 20 or 30, it's only 5. It goes into the category of major.
Anything above 5. Right. And we do talk a little bit in our draft too about some of the minor subdivisions, because we did want to see the town avoid having death by 1,000 cuts or even small cuts, where people buy land and they subdivide a little bit and then they go away and then they come back and they subdivide again. And really, we want to look at the whole. We want to see how this is going to affect our town, how it's going to affect the land use. And yes, in the future, right? So, this is this slide is actually a very good illustration of how we address land use development and housing. And we brought the two together with the environment. So in a conventional development, which many of you probably know, that you hear the term cookie cutter, right?
That's today's rules. Conventional development is today's rules on the subdivision.
On the left of the screen.
Thank you.
That's today's
That's
rules.
right. That's what currently exists in our zoning is conventional development. And when it goes to the planning board on which Judith sits, they have to use the current code to guide them when an applicant comes in. They can't say, oh, no, you've got to do a conservation subdivision. They'll say, no, we don't. This is what we can do. And as you can see with that, thank you, Jeff, for bringing that up. And as you can see, it's very fragmented. There's also topographic lines there, which I don't know if you can see on the left, but if you can see that development goes all the way up on slopes. We looked at slopes. We looked at other environmental resources. We looked at clustering. We looked at ways of keeping as much open space as possible, but recognizing that people buy land and they have certain rights to develop their land. And we don't have the tools right now. And so our looking at this and saying, well, if we're going to look at housing, more than, we didn't look at single family houses, that's another set of issues. But we wanted to make sure that it was done in the most environmental way possible that reflected Woodstock. And so the conservation-based development is an approach that is getting traction in New York State. DEC just came out with a guidance manual on it. And it isn't used everywhere. So it's, again, a place where Woodstock, I think, is on the cutting edge of doing something really important. In our proposed conservation-based subdivision regulations, and it does also apply in other areas, and I'm going to sort of turn to Nan for that, but I just want to say that, number one, 50% of a parcel is conserved. Then you calculate what can be built on that land. And so the net acreage, I am going to turn to Nan for this, because this is always when I get a little lost on.
If you look at the one, at the conventional, you see each of those lots is like
Right.
5 acres.
Right.
Big lots. And there's lots of space between the houses, and you have to travel a long ways to get all the houses.
Right,
And it cuts up the land.
right.
And it has to be 5.
It has to be
It
5.
can't be any
You
different than that.
can't make it small.
With conservation base, you'll see the houses are clustered. There's less roads, there's more woods. We haven't disturbed the slopes.
And it's
As opposed to
density,
go.
it's density neutral,
And it's density neutral, the same number of houses,
same number of
but
houses.
less environmental disruption.
Right, right. And the lots can be smaller. They don't need to be 5 lots if you're in an R5. So, I think actually this is probably a good time, Nan, to ask you to go into a little more detail about the conservation subdivision, which you really brought to our attention. And really very pleased.
Yeah, well, I think that the conservation-based development is really the only technique that we have that allows the same level of development to be done in an environmental way. The whole premise of it is that, the density that's set by the zoning, people, that's a policy of the town. And so people have the right to be able to get that kind of density, but we need to do it in a smarter way. And so as Jeff said, instead of spreading out large lots that are very expensive and that eat up the landscape, that the conservation subdivision allows us to be strategic. It allows us to be flexible. It gives landowners a lot more opportunities to be creative and to work with the land. And it can result in less infrastructure, more connection, more community building. They always include trails and linkages. And I just want to make one small correction.
Okay,
Is that because it's density neutral, that means that you calculate your density on the whole, and the 50% comes off after.
okay.
So that you're not like taking away 50% of someone's development capacity. So that's what goes back to being density neutral.
Right.
And I do want to say that I think one really, really significant tool that the task force has added in is the concept of net acreage, which is the second bullet up there. And what that means is that we have to, if we really want to be environmentally sensitive about our development, we have to tailor what each parcel has different characteristics. And so we have to understand the capacity of each parcel. And parcel A might be flat and have no environmental issues at all. The same 50 acres on a steep slope is very different. So the net acreage is a technique to better match the actual realistic density that's allowed on that parcel based on the environmental conditions. So the net, I know that everybody is concerned about density and how many houses there are going to be, and you know, what's the ultimate build out going to be. But the net acreage is a technique where we remove from the count your wetlands, your steep slopes, and your other significant environmental features. So let's say you have 100 acres and you have a 20-acre wetland on that parcel. Your density is calculated from subtracting out the 20 acres of wetlands, so you have 80 acres of land to then apply your 5-acre density or your 3-acre density to, or whatever. So that alone is a really significant, I think, is a really significant tool to match. You're setting the policy for the district, but then recognizing that all parcels are different and unique. And so we do a much better job than by saying, we're going to match up the right capacity of development for that parcel. And then on top of that, we're going to do this flexible and creative development that builds with the land rather than that builds on the land. And that's really what the conservation subdivision is all about.
I think
Yeah.
going into our next segment.
Doing another switch.
Building envelopes.
Yeah, the building envelope is, who was it, who asked that? Okay, great, thanks. The building envelope is simply, we just stay on it. It's the amount of land that gets disturbed in the development process of that land. So it's the roads, the driveway, the septic, the foundation area where the actual buildings will be. So that becomes the envelope, if you will. And when we first introduced this idea, or when the idea was spoken to the planning board, the chair of the planning board got really excited. This is a really great tool to establish that building envelope and to mark it then on the plat. So it becomes a documentable element where you can't later, years later, change it and say, oh no, it was this. It'll be documented. So that building envelope becomes a very key issue. Jeff?
Yeah, the point of that, having that being decided before you do the subdivision, is the planning board can say, I want the building envelope here. This is the best place to have your building be. And once they say it's there, it's gotta be there. So decisions made before they approve the subdivision. You know where you can build a house, where you can put the cars.
That answer your question? Okay, great, thanks. So on to the next one, slide. So one of the things we did with the housing code is that it's a very complex document. And there was mentions of housing throughout the code. And so what we did, brought all the elements of housing into a single chapter. So again, ease of use for the property owners and also developers, you might say, and the neighbors. So that there can be a place where people can go and read and have the ability to concentrate on the issues associated with housing. So we brought all of that into a single chapter. It's called chapter 8. And so you could just simply go to that chapter in the housing code if you wanted to read the code, and that would be what you would read, and you would get the bulk of it. You know, what is this?
This is the
The
annotated.
annotated, yeah, so we're going to talk about that a little bit later, but you'll be able to focus on specifics within the code. So that was all. Now I'm going to go on to the next one. So one of the policy outcomes for the zoning code is we address ADUs, additional accessory dwelling units. Now this has a new name than what was on the code. It was
Accessory apartment.
apartments, accessory apartments. So this is a more contemporary term, accessory dwelling units, and you hear it all the time. Right. And so one of the things that happened during this, the ADUs have been available as of right in this town since 1998. You could go to the planning board, to the town board, to the building department. The building department, fill out a building permit and have your ADU built on your property. There would be no need for the planning board, there'd be no need for any review of such. It's
If
an
you could
as of
figure
right.
out what the wording meant in the law.
Yeah,
and
if you
that
can
was
figure out the
difficult.
law. So one of the things that we did was we clarified a lot of the standards and regulations associated with ADUs. And in one word, it's simplified and applied strict environmental siting criteria for that. So again, clarity for the property owner, for the neighbors, for everybody that would be involved in that particular property that was going to now have an ADU on the property. Question?
What is an ADU?
Okay, accessory dwelling unit, it's a secondary dwelling. Thank you for that question.
Mother-in-law.
It's a mother-in-law apartment or all the other names that we've had over the years. And so it's, you know,
Subordinate.
and for those who really understand, you know, have a long history of the code, you could probably give us another name on it back in the day. All right.
But it could be,
We need to say one thing. The question of what's an artist studio, what's a pool house, what's a guest cottage, what's an ADU was always troubling,
All over.
and we have clarified that.
Yeah, cool.
It was pretty mixed up, and it's not uncommon when you do land use, code over time, and things don't always get, brought along. So we looked at that and said, oh, these are all ADUs, and we need to make sure they get.
And the chicken house, it's not an
Yes.
ADU.
Can you explain designated affordable? What does that mean?
Yeah, very good question. So we have, as far as basically it's below market rate. So it's not market rate rental, it's below the market, and that would be that could help be determined by some of the policies that will need to be passed by the town board. Some aspects of measure to that, so that it would be held so there would be consistency from one property to the next. So some of the details of that need to be made in policy by the town board. And we have a whole list of documentations, of recommendations and policy that is going to be offered to the town board that would support this law, enable this law. So part of that designation, John, is that basically the bottom line is it will be below market rate and won't be able to be risen by the market as it changes.
I'm getting at what makes it so. That's-
Okay, so it's a designated meaning. So in this case, we're allowing in the code a second ADU, okay, on a property, given the proper specifications and issues associated with the criteria that we have listed in the law. So that second ADU has to be affordable. So that's a must, that's a mandate. And
I'm
then
getting at what makes it affordable.
It's-
How do
it's-
you-
it's the income levels.
it's based on the income of the person who's living there.
No, no, no. When the owner says this is $10,000 a month, what does the town do to say, no, you can't do that?
Okay, I'm gonna read you something from the code, which is just a piece of it. I just happened to open to this page, my father had
Go ahead and read
read.
it.
My father had read. In this instance, it talks about affordable housing units shall remain affordable to individuals or families having up to 80% of area median income, AMI, and by individuals and families having a moderate income of up to 120% of AMI. So the actual figure that is put on that rental cannot be more than that family can, what is it, 30%
30%.
of their family's income. So there are data that are used, the county uses them, HUD uses them. Those are the standards that we're going to recommend be applied in Woodstock. And then how that is overseen is, I think, what Kirk is talking about in terms of policy.
Yeah, so that AMI gets revisited and revised every year from HUD down into the county and then down into the municipality. And then now being based on verification of that income of that family or person, that if their income has changed, then the rate, then their 30% of that would change as well. So there's a continuation of enforcement here that we need to acknowledge in order to maintain affordability. So there's an element of regulation here, John, that I think that is important to acknowledge. I really appreciate you asking this question, because you can see this is part of the community and part of the town and part of the ability to ensure that there isn't abuse, or ensure that there isn't somehow circumstances that prevent that person from continuing in that. If the person's income goes up, their rent is going to go up. Or if they're in market rate, then guess what? They're going to be, they're probably, that apartment should be made available to someone else. So these are the things that go on. And
It's up to the town board. The regulatory part comes later. It's not
Yes.
up to the housing.
Right, it's not in here, okay, and it can't be written into code, in codified, because circumstances change, inflation changes, all these different things, right?
I'll
Dan?
stop here, but I'm curious who's gonna do that.
Yeah, well, that's part of the policy that we're recommending, that there needs to be an effort to where there's a body that looks at the AMI every year and says to the town board, this is the AMI for this year based on the data that's come. All of that has to be put in place. So,
Yeah, I just wanted to say that there are certain restrictions as to the kinds of entities that can do those kinds of things in a municipality.
Right.
Like cities can do it, certain villages can do it, towns such as Woodstock are, we can't create our own housing authority the way the city of Kingston could, or Village of New Paltz.
Let me though add though that when someone comes to the town planning board, for instance, to get a second ADU,
Yeah.
their approval is tied to it being an affordable unit, and that is part of what they're approved to do from the town.
Right.
And there's deed restrictions that would tie that requirement to that parcel.
Deed restrictions, okay.
So there is a deed restriction, and John Lyons pointed that deed restriction is a very good tool for this town to use in these circumstances. To go back to what an ADU is, there are size matters in terms of, there's a maximum of, I think, 1,500. 1,500, and there's a size, on the other side, 400, and it's smaller than the house. So it's a sub-residence to the primary residence, and that's what makes it an accessory dwelling unit. It's that smaller. We have someone want to ask. a question?
Yeah. You said the second ADU, so this proposed law would not apply to a first ADU?
The affordable aspect of it does not apply to the first ADU.
So you have
because
a
that law-
house, and then you can have an ADU that does not have these requirements, and then the second ADU has.
would
these
have
requirements.
those requirements. because-
That's by right.
And that's
It has to meet certain
Yeah, but the first
criteria
one
in
doesn't
terms
have.
of siting.
Right, so one of the things that this task force stayed within our guardrails is having to do with everything that is not as of right. We didn't touch anything having to do with as of right. And so
Explain
What is that?
as of right is, again, is your right as a property owner. You don't need to have planning board approve it or any other board. You can go to the building department directly and apply for your building permit, and the building department will manage the process for you, and that is an as of right.
You're
Single
changing
family
these.
home.
It's in the code today. I think what Kirk is saying is the as of right, things are in the code today. The first ADU is in the code today. We didn't take away anything
Okay.
that you can do today with the
You're not
first ADU.
changing the code, you're adding to it.
We're correct, we're
Right,
adding
right.
another option to
Right.
it.
Let me say one thing about that, though. The use of first ADUs as short-term rentals is subject to what the town board is doing about short-term rentals. It doesn't automatically mean that everybody's got an ADU can do an SDR.
Right.
I just need to make more.
But I think it's important to finish, right?
What's that?
Guys finish.
So we're trying to figure
Yes.
out. I just want.
Well, my favorite, I
No,
think-
well, how do you-
Question,
Yes.
kind of applies to what we're talking
Is this okay?
about here.
One more and then we'll
All right,
keep
good.
going.
Go ahead.
Online, you've got 309 pages published of the new zoning law. And you said earlier that basically you've only changed a very small fraction of the existing zoning.
Yeah.
What I'm asking is, where do you find the document that shows the markup? Where,
It's on the town board.
It's on
I
the
just looked at it.
Yeah, Michael, there's two. For the subdivision code 202 and for the zoning 260, there's two copies of each. One copy of each is the clean copy, no markup. The other copy of each is the red line.
That's the one you want to look at.
And that will
That will
show
show what we did.
just what you changed.
Exactly.
What's been added, what's been.
Yeah, and they're gonna
stricken.
talk to you about the annotated table of contents also, which is a way to, a separate document is this annotated table of contents will be a roadmap to help you find those things that changed.
All right, so let's go back to the ADUs.
Just to be clear,
Yeah, ADUs.
if you're looking at the red line, you're looking at all 320 pages, but you can see the red lines, and if you're dealing with like paving rules, 20 or 30 pages, you can just go right by and you'll see where the new stuff is.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
Yes,
it's-
all right, great. So we're gonna keep moving.
I just,
Yep, you can correct it later next time you stand up.
no, the main thing that's
On
on
the
the,
ADU?
on the ADU.
All right, so,
So ADU, because we did change it, we dropped it from 1,500 to 1,000 maximum, because it is subordinate to the primary residence, and this, it is 300 is the smallest, so it incorporates a tiny house, or up to 1,000. That's the range, and all of the details of that are in the code, but we did make that change recently.
Well,
Because there
that's
are
it.
plenty of houses that are smaller than 15.
So one thing I just want to point out is that in the 2 years the task force was in play, was in this, most of our time was on ADUs. I think we just did that tonight. We spent more time on ADUs again. So just telling you a pattern here. We
We
really
also
worked hard on it.
didn't mention the most important thing.
Yeah.
Short-term rentals are prohibited in the second ADU. forever.
Right, and I want to mention one other thing that's equally important. The reason why we're bringing this additional ADU in is to promote long-term housing in our town, where there's, it's less intensive to have an ADU put on a piece of property than it is to build a whole complex of affordable housing. So this is another way that we can have a less impact, if you will, and leverage existing properties for long-term houses for those who can afford it.
One more thing, Chris.
Yes, Jeff.
It's also the simplest thing to build is an ADU.
Yeah,
An ADU is simple to build, a house is hard to build.
It's green. You're recycling something that already exists.
It's already a
Exactly.
disturbed lot,
within the envelope.
yes.
yeah.
You can add a wing, you can add a room, you can subdivide a building that already exists.
Attached, detached.
Yeah, you get a lot of
interiors,
flexibility.
floor, attic,
A lot of
whatever.
flexibility. We're gonna go on to the next slide. Thank you.
We got a lot to go.
So the thing, what we also introduced, one thing about the comprehensive plan is that it talked about creating housing opportunities or housing options. And so we introduced the idea of a 3 and 4-plex building that is 3-unit or 4-unit in a single building. The reason why we focused on that is because these are the same size, they have size restrictions, and they're the same size as the size restrictions of a single family home, okay? So and there are size restrictions within the certain areas of the town. I mean, out in the outside, they don't have the, as built as a single family homes can be huge, right? But there are restrictions on this. And one thing I want to point out about these 3 and 4 units and all of the multifamily law that's here is that there's a tremendous amount of criteria that has been baked into this to ensure that these buildings are, one, that there is, provisions for environmental and site criteria, really strict environmental and site criteria that needs to be matched. There's also standards for landscaping so that privacy with neighbors and in terms of blocking views of parking and things of that nature, all of that is in the code, okay? Another thing I wanted to point out is that the provisions for complete streets, okay, someone brought this up last night. We have provisions for complete streets, meaning encouraging there to be bike and pathways and walkability associated with the development of these properties. And electric vehicle chargers, we have that in the code as well. And so these are all incentives, and there can be additional incentives that the town board can embrace, such as, for charges for electric bikes, which is something we're gonna want more and more of. So we need to bring that into the idea of creating incentives for the private property owners, that if they can have an incentive, they'll put those electric chargers for the bikes and a storage from the weather on it, so that those who live there can have it. So you have less cars, okay, less traffic, even though you're creating more housing. So that was one of the things I wanted to point out. Yes. Who's this?
Just to point out, most people probably don't know duplexes are already allowed as of right.
As of right,
So this is a little bit larger building than a duplex.
it's mentioned in two
It's
places
a
in the
new
code.
category.
Anyways, the other thing I wanted to point out is that there is a trend in our country of this thing called middle housing. Middle housing is the housing that is basically this. This is the same size as a house, but it has 3 units or 4 units. And those used to be built extensively before World War II, and they have not been built since then. And the focus was on single-family homes throughout our country, across every town, every area of our town, every area of our country. And so this is something that's being reintroduced in multiple municipalities in this country, is this element of middle housing. And one of the things that we strive for as a task force is to sort of give support for this trend, to enable this to happen, to where these types of buildings can be built in a neighborhood, and you will see that they will be like the neighborhood. That's an important part of what we emphasize in our code. So this is a trend, again, that Woodstock is on a leading edge of, but it is a trend that's growing throughout the country.
Yeah, can I?
Yeah,
Jen,
please.
before you change the page. I just wanted to, a lot of what people are saying is, oh, all of a sudden you're opening the door, great development, you're gonna have building everywhere, and you're just gonna have all the rich people buying up the stuff and all the prices are gonna go crazy. This thing about at least one deed restricted affordable unit required is there are things baked into these updates that say some of these are going to be affordable. So as people say, oh no, every developer is going to go crazy, they're not, because this is not the first page where we said deed restricted affordable.
Right.
It's on other pages as well. So part of what this is, there's a theory that says if you want to get, the old supply and demand, if you increase supply, price will go down, but also we're going to force price to go down because we have some deed restricted affordable. So we're trying a number of ways to get more housing and to make it be affordable.
Excellent. So one of the things also I wanted to point out is that there are no short-term rentals allowed in any multifamily housing that is built in this town. So that's one thing that we have in the law.
One more thing, on this one purpose.
Yeah.
I'm interested in is, the first bullet says requires approval from the planning board. Draft 1, we have these be as of rights. And the comments said, don't make it as of right, make the planning board approve it. So we've listened to what the town has said about that.
Right.
We've changed from draft 1 to this draft.
Good. So, next slide, please. So this is something that is introduced, and Nan's going to speak to this a little bit, and so you get a break from my voice. Hang in there. So a floating residential district is a district that requires town board approval, first of all, and also planning board and town board determine the location and the allocation of that site. There's a tremendous amount of strict criteria that is for a floating residential district. And there are none allowed in the scenic overlay. There are also none allowed in any R8s, because most of the R8s have high environmental sensitivity areas, and they're not allowed in those areas.
What's in the R8?
R8 is 8 acres. So you have an R8, if you're in an R8 section, each of those lots that you would subdivide have to be 8 acres. or
Under the
larger.
current law.
Under the current law.
And they'll have to average 8 acres under the new law.
So, that's there's R8, R5, R3, R1.5, and a little bit others. But, so that's what we mean by R8 is the amount of acreage that we can do, the smallest amount. So the other element of this is that it's got really strong criteria for size and scale and siting that reflect the town's character. Big thing, okay? Really important. The planning board could use that as a way of saying no if it doesn't fit with the character. Keep that in mind. And the other thing is it promotes affordable housing. Now, this is what's interesting, is that if, one of the things that I wanted to say, and I'll say it now again, when you do revisions of code, you have to write code for the developer that wants to come into our town and build, okay? You have to. There's only been one time that this has been used, and Nan will talk about it, in the last 35 years.
Not this.
Not this, but the prior code, the current code that uses a planned residential district, it was only used once. And that was with Woodstock Commons. The entire 35 years, it was only used once, okay? So you have to write code for the developer that will think about this town and want to come in. Now, if a developer now reads our code, the new code, and the new law, they'll read, oh my God, I gotta take 50% of my land and give it away, you know, to conserve it. And 60% of the buildings that I put on there are gonna have to be affordable. A lot of developers are gonna like that. That's the reason why we wrote it this way. We want the developer that can come into our town and that's aligned with our town and the values of our town. And that's what this FRD does. It constricts the developer and removes what some people call the greedy developers, because they won't want to be here if they can't do what they typically would do in a town. Is it related to this?
Yeah, is affordability already defined, or is it like?
Affordability has been defined throughout the code, and it's very, yes, sure.
Look in the definition section.
Yeah, there's a definition section in the code that defines it. So again, and 60% of the properties on floating residential district needs to be deemed affordable. Permanently. And it's not like you can build all the good homes or the wealthy homes and expensive homes and then build the affordable. You have to build them in conjunction with as the project unfolds. So there's you can't save it for the end, right? Which is what some developers will do. Nan, can you please add some more comments to this, because I'm sure I didn't fully do it
Yeah,
justice.
so what I wanted to just convey is the difference between what you have now and what's being proposed. So what you have now is a planned residential district, which in the planning arena that I live in is basically called legalized spot zoning. It's basically a developer comes in and says, I want to do something that's not allowed in your zoning law. And they negotiate with the town board to get it approved. There's very little boundaries on it. There's very little rules. And it's basically a negotiation. And the developer says, I want to do this. And the town board says, well, we'd like you to do that. And they end up usually taking a long time to figure out. And more often than not, in my experience, which is why I don't like them, is the town doesn't get very much out of having it. And the developer kind of undoes the zoning by coming in with something else. So the floating residential district maintains some level of flexibility for a developer who might have a really good idea. But we're actually creating a district. Just like your R8 district, your R5 district, all the rules are set, what's allowed, how many allowed, what the sizes are, what the standards are, where they're going to be, what environmental things need to be protected, and on and on. Everything is set, just like your normal districts are now, except it's not mapped. So it's floating. It's a district that's created with all the rules and regulations, but it's not mapped. Until someone comes to the town and says, I have this great idea and I can meet all these rules. And I have a piece of land that would be perfect for that. Then they go to the town board and ask for that zoning district to be established on that parcel. And then once if the town board agrees to it, and they don't have to, that would be up to the town board. It's not a must, it's a may. If the town board agrees to it, then the development has to follow all of those rules. So they know what the performance expectations are. The town can establish its performance expectations, and it's a much, it's a way to take out of, it really puts the town in control of that development, but still gives some flexibility. There are some creative, interesting developments out there that can work. This gives someone an opportunity. They can meet rules and meet all of these restrictions, great. But we're as a community gonna establish what those
Nan,
performance
could I-
expectations.
Hold you. Who's ever unmuted online, could you please mute yourself because we can hear you at the meeting?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Did you want me to answer questions or how to?
Okay, yeah, we'll take it.
Yeah, is an example of this, like there's a 50-acre parcel in an R5 district. Somebody says, I have this 50-acre parcel, I want to do something in not be R5. Is that an example?
Yes, provided they can meet
Right,
all
so it
of
could
those
be
standards.
Now, they can't, but with this, they could do whatever you want.
Well, but
More
it's,
flexibility.
well, they have to meet, it's not like, hey, I'm in the R5 district and I want to put in a mini steel mill.
I understand,
It's
but whatever follows the requirement.
Yes, yes.
And it's above a certain amount of housing.
Oh,
Right.
40 is the number, I think, right?
Right,
So
right.
you wouldn't be doing an FRD unless you want to do more than 40 dwelling units, 40 more dwelling units, then you'd be looking at an FRD. So it's not going to happen all the time.
Okay.
Which people shouldn't worry it's going to happen all the time. But if you have a big project, there is a way, a process to go through that could allow it if it's deemed appropriate.
Yeah.
And it's capped as well. There's a limit. You can't put in thousands of units.
One other question, you may be addressing this later, but doesn't the town have a lot of land that could perhaps be initiative, where their initiative could be, that could be utilized in order to help solve the housing crisis?
You mean the town own it or the
Town own it.
There's town land that is in, throughout this town. The housing committee did an inventory of all the town owned land. And most of it is engaged in parking lots, it's the tower, the water towers, at various locations.
Well, most of it is more than
Most of it
50%,
is-
but how much is
So
possible?
there's like, for instance, there's only one lot in the hamlet that is town owned that can handle any type of
Okay, so
housing. It's limited.
You're only.
There's some lots out on the eastern part of town that are fairly sizable, but the access is very isolated. So there's certain issues associated with town land, but most of the land that the town owns is engaged in purpose already for the public good. And so, that's what the town land is all about, right?
But yes, we're looking at that.
But there is some element of town land that's being reviewed.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because they really want to, push this forward, that's under the town control.
It's only about a half a dozen parcels.
Yeah, it's very small, very small.
Less-
Hey, Deborah, I believe you're up.
Oh, I know.
Yeah, you're next.
So I think you're getting the impression that there's a lot going on in this material. And again, what we are going to be having some more dialogue about it. We want to try and cover as much as we can tonight, so that you get a pretty good flavor of what we're trying to do and why we're trying to do it and how we're doing it. So the next slide.
One second. May 30th, we're gonna have a community event. We're gonna learn more about it at 6:30.
Rachel Quinlan from the Housing Committee.
So at the community center on May 30th, we're gonna do part 2.
Good.
So give you some time to read in between, come with your questions. We'll do more to learn more about it, and answer questions.
Can I say one thing about the documents online? There are a lot of documents. Some of them are background, like the list of all the comments
We'll get to
people
that,
made
Jerry.
and
It's
how
on
they
this
look
slide.
up.
We'll get to that, this slide.
Yeah, we have that. So some of you know me, I have a career, prior career as an environmental professional. This is really near and dear to me to see applying a lot of the environmental principles I've worked for decades to come into our community and to put it into a zoning code. And again, that came about in part because of the comprehensive plan stating that as a goal for this town. And so when we started looking at housing, it's not automatic that environmental criteria are part of housing, but we made sure that it is. And so throughout the entire zoning code and the subdivision, we have a number of elements that provide regulations that are protective of the environment. And they're strict, and they're standards. They're not mays, they're shalls. So this is part and parcel of how we're trying to direct what happens in the future, so it meets our dual goals of housing that people can afford and protecting our environment.
Who's going to oversee and enforce all?
Okay, so who's going to oversee and enforce? Well, the planning board is one of the bodies that is authorized to carry out the zoning law. The building department enforces the law. And if I missed anybody, I'm sorry.
ZBA.
The ZBA, thank you, Michael, and who is also is involved in ensuring that the regulations are met, and that whoever comes before them has to follow those regulations in order to get their permits, in order to get approval. So, yeah, we're going to keep moving. This restates some of the things we've talked about it. I'm sorry.
Did you want this page or the environment?
No,
page?
that one.
This one?
Yeah.
Sorry.
I just want to mention a couple of things. We talked about net density, buildable land. We talked about average lot sizes. There are numerous environmental standards having to do with slopes and wetlands, et cetera. We didn't talk a little too much about density bonuses. This is really for developments where there are affordable units, that in order to get additional affordable units, one can apply for a bonus with using green energy and renewable energy goals. And so, again, that's in the law. I just want to bring that to your attention. And Nan, did you want to talk a little bit more, or we pretty much covered these? I know we talked a lot. We talked a lot on the phone about how.
Unless there was something specific.
Okay.
I think the key here is that all of these conservation and environmental criteria are applied to every type of house.
Every type of house, thank you. And that's the idea of it's throughout the zoning law. So you're gonna see it again and again and again. Okay.
All right, we're getting there. Coming around the bend. The one thing that we would just want to point out next is that we also create an opportunity for multiple houses, such as clustered cottages. Clustered cottages are smaller buildings that are clustered together with like a courtyard or such. Actually, some of the older construction in Woodstock is really known for that. Some of the neighborhoods like Orchard Lane and those homes back there, right? Pardon?
Calamar Lane was.
Calamar Lane was.
Could be again.
Could be again. So those things, tiny homes is another one. Co-housing is a concept that you may be familiar with. It's the same type of concept where some of the buildings on the property are common to the residents who live there. And usually those residents are a little smaller because of those common buildings. One aspect I wanted to point out was something that championed by Laura was the continuing care. So again, speaking to the aging part of our community, that we don't really have any kind of facilities that are other than just homes that are designated to provide continuous care. So we brought in another, how would you call this name, like a new use?
Yeah, another category.
Another category in the use table that is about continuous care, and there's a lot of restrictions, a lot of criteria there. So that was something we also created. So this is just one more thing that we introduced into the zoning code, is all the various types of buildings and stuff. So keep moving on. One thing I wanted to point out on this slide, and Judy is going to help me on this, is that one of the issues that we focused on throughout the effort was to expand the toolbox that the planning board has for its review and approval process. And so much of the things that have in the code gives the planning board further clarity. Just language in itself, be written clearly is a tool. And so that is something that we brought in to make sure that that the clarity of language was there. And the other element is that we created user's aid boxes. So if something is, a concept is articulated, is mentioned, there'll be an aid box on the side that gives definitions of that. There's also definitions in the code further back, but whenever there's something a little bit more that would be less known, if you will, there are reader's aid boxes. And we were actually going to recommend to the town that they create a user's guide, separate issue that would be a separate document that would sit and help people that would come into this document and help them look at, how to use the document. We're going to recommend that to the town board. And then other aspect of it is that one of the things that the planning board wanted to do was to establish a rule that was a must, that was required, that would help the collaboration between the planning board and the property owner to begin right at the beginning. And so there was this element of this pre-sketch review that was already in the code, but it was optional. It's now required. And so that means that the property owners won't amass their lawyers and engineers and get all this effort together even before they talk to the planning board. And so now the planning board, now that all that, is the requirement is you first have to come in, talk to us and give us the opportunity to hear what your thoughts are so that we can add, and have you thought about this and have you thought about that, and it establishes a collaborative environment. And I wanted Judy to add a little bit more things to the slide that you might feel appropriate.
Well, there's one line that didn't show up because it drops off the
Oh,
bottom.
yeah, the modified site plan.
Modified site plan, yeah.
Go
The
ahead.
3 and 4 plexes, because they're just a little bigger than the duplex. We don't want people to have to go through quite as much aggravation as they would have to do for a major undertaking. So that has a streamlined process.
Right.
They don't have to necessarily get a full dress survey before they even come in to see it. So it simplifies it. It makes it an easier thing for somebody to do at 3 or 4.
Right. But for those of you who are going to read the code, I suggest that you try to find this box that was up there that you can't see, because it's at the very beginning of the housing chapter 8. And it basically is, it gives an overview of the chapter and of housing and of the perspective that we brought. So anything else associated with the planning board that we strive to do with the code to help the planning board?
Okay, I'm sorry, I might be speaking out of turn here, but earlier you mentioned there's a human side to this. You all see me, you all hear me? Look, guys, not because I did anything wrong. This is a sheriff's warrant for May 31st, for me to get out of my rental. I pay $1,300 a month, but my property owner says you're costing me money. They intend on renting my place for $4 grand a month. So from $15,600 up to $48,000 annually, yeah, I'm costing the money. But I'm the casualty that you all are working for.
Right.
So I don't have a place to go in this community. And I called DSS and there's not a motel room anywhere. I'm a married couple. We don't fit into the home share program. We don't fit into the motels. I have a piece of property in Sorries, which I wrote to you about. You did respond to me. But I don't have the money to do the engineering or the septic. And I fall between the cracks in Rutco's programs because I own the property. So I don't know how fast you can do this. If it began in 2018, I know I attended meetings in 17 and 18 on the STRs, because this was starting to get really bad then.
So listen, we all feel, that's why we're working so hard to get this done.
Please do something.
We are working
I
on
am
it.
not the only one. My husband's a good man
Thank you.
and he works hard. and I do home health care. So I'm one of the people you always saying you need here.
Thank you.
Okay, so if I move out, who takes care of my patients?
Yeah,
Okay, they do matter, and they do need me.
yeah, thank you for
Thank
your
you.
bravery to bring this forward tonight. Really. Okay, next slide, please. Thank you for that.
I'm sorry.
Don't apologize. You don't need to leave. Okay. So we want to just point out real quick that what's going to be, what is on the website now are the two laws in two versions, the clean version and then what was the red line version of each. So you have the two draft laws on the website, which is, you go to the website, the first page, you go to the bottom of the list on the bottom, it says zoning updates. You click that, that'll take you to this page. But all the rest of the documents are there to help the community get information about the new code. What that means is that the code is really difficult to read. It's not a novel. It's not meant to be read like a novel. We have this, the annotated table of contents, the third bullet on the top three. This will enable you to find exactly where you want to go in the code. Okay, but all these other documents will help you understand the summary of benefits, the history of of this task force, the mapping exercise that we spoke to earlier. There's a detailed mapping explanation of what we did to help you understand what that effort was about. Okay, and then there's the version 1 that's also there. So all these documents are for the community, those there. And that's what we suggest you look at first, are those documents. And then the
Highlights
link,
first.
the link,
Summary report second.
yeah,
Then if you want to dig into the law, they're up at the top. And the
exactly,
table of contents will take you to the things that have been changed.
precisely. Thank you, Judy. The link is there at the bottom of the slide, but I just told you how to get there. Okay, zoning updates on page 1. And then there's also an email that you can, after reading it, if you have comments or questions, you can email us. What this means is we're here, we're taking input. It's part of the comment period. And it continues. And we continue to review what the input that has on it with it. And now I'm going to hand it over to Deborah and she's going to finish up. Thanks for your patience.
So I just want to mention one more thing about this, because we had these documents when we submitted version 1, again, because we knew it was a lot to navigate, so we, at that time, we had the annotated table of contents. It's all been updated with the new draft law. We also had and have 2 charts that are major housing initiatives, a handout, which is a shorter version of the housing benefits and environmental benefits, and then a longer detailed version. And again, I just commend these to you so that you can understand what the impact of these proposals can mean for our town. So with that, I think we'll go to next.
Before the next slide, the one thing that didn't get said yet that I think probably should get said is that as you look at version 2, version 1 came out almost a year ago. And so version 1 was a lot of changes based on what the Housing Oversight Task Force thought should get changed, with a lot of great advice from Nan. And then what happened the last year was taking input from everybody from Woodstock and making some changes. So when you look at version 2 compared to version 1, it's not vastly different. You know, the changes were in version 1. Version 2 is a little delta based on feedback we got, specific to feedback that we got.
Yep. And those comments is one of the documents. Version 1 comments is a document you can look at what those comments are.
You can see what people said to us.
And the categories they fell into.
Yep.
Okay, next slide. Next steps. This is my favorite slide. It's forward looking. So this recaps a couple of things that have already happened. We submitted the draft law to the town board on April 18th, and a resolution was passed to accept them for review. And that is the next bullet, which initiated the local law adoption process. And I'm sure all of you are much more familiar with this. and the steps that the town officially and legally has to go through to consider this draft law for adoption. At that time, the town refers the draft law, the zoning and subdivision law, to the Ulster County Planning Board. That's required. It's a 239 review. And so that is now under review by them, and they have 45 days to respond. At the same time, the law was sent to the town planning board. And we know, because we've already heard from Melissa, that it's being gone over with a fine tooth comb. And they will also be providing us with formal comments. Simultaneously, the town will be going through its environmental quality review, which is required, and we'll be scheduling a public hearing. All throughout all of this, since we submitted the law, public comment period is happening right now. So as Kirk said, there's a zoning update at woodstockny.org for comments. Go to the town website, to the zoning updates page, and you can see how to submit comments. And there are these, again, there's the housing committee meeting, there'll be public hearing, there'll be opportunities for more discussion. And once all of that has come in, the town board will conduct a review process and then consider any additional changes or fine tuning before you consider voting to adopt the law. So that's the process that we're in. And the next slide, please. So I just want to take a moment. First of all, a man came all the way from Schoharie County and has been a remarkable person to work with for the last 2 years, giving us guidance, but not have to. You must do this or you must do that. It was not her way or the highway. It was our learning and being guided on how to learn about housing and zoning and the environment, and looking to interpret our comprehensive plan so it achieves the goals that the community is seeking. She's an amazing planner, somebody I have wanted to work with for decades, since I first heard her name. She's only one of 9 planners in New York State who's inducted into the National College of Fellows of the American Institute of Certified Planners. That's a wonderful honor and recognition. And only one of 11 certified environmental planners in New York State. I think we mentioned that she has a previous background as environmental planner. And she's worked in dozens of communities, many rural communities throughout New York State. This really struck me because I've worked with other planners and people who've done materials for the DEC. And so she was the principal consultant and author for the seeker documents for the DEC. And I think they're on the DEC website if you want to see them. And she's won 3-time award winner by the APA Small Town and Rural Planning Division. She's also a wonderful person to work with. She listens and she responds, and has really helped us to establish a sense of teamwork and the ability to problem solve, which is what something like this really requires. And then she brought Rick Lederer Barnes to us as a consultant and GIS specialist, who also worked a little bit with Judith because she's our local GIS specialist, and helped us to really take the map of the town, the resources of the town, and analyze them, evaluate them to find the best options for protecting our environment and where housing made sense. So that analysis was tremendous. And so I think that's
The only thing I would like to point out, the alphabet soup here. State Environmental Quality Review, which is required for just about every major undertaking. The SEAF and the FEAF are the short and long forms that everybody who makes an application to the planning board fills out, either the short one or the long one. But that's all under seeker, and tweaker is the town of Woodstock version, which is slightly larger.
We had to do it our way. So last slide. So, I just want to thank the town board again for giving us the floor this evening to provide the kind of granular information that to bring to you and to the community. I want to thank everyone for listening to us. And I also want to thank all the people on the task force again for just being incredibly dedicated. We met monthly for a while, then we started meeting weekly. And in many instances now, we've been meeting in between
I got
meetings.
her on speed dial.
Yes. And then through all that, we had Nan guiding us through this process. So we feel very good about it done. We hope that it helps inform the community of how we can be in control of our destiny in a way that is thoughtful and environmental and will help people like that young lady who was here earlier. Who gets it?
I think that, I think,
We all have.
I don't know who gets it last.
Okay.
Well, Bill was here, but I don't see him.
Oh,
now.
Bill.
So I just want to say quickly, Deborah, thank you, Kirk, Jeff, Mike,
And the
Lorena.
slides will be on the website.
Oh, yeah. The slides will be on there.
Thank you very much. It's quite a journey. So anybody who has follow-up questions, May 30th,
Yes,
6:30 to 9:30. There's also, or 8:30, there's also, you can email the information website and
And we're logging everything that's come in. We've had a few things that have come in. Everything is being logged, just as we did in the first version. So everything will be, it'll all be there.
okay.
Yeah, and as always, I want to say my thank you to Deborah and Kurt for the great leadership of the task force, very thorough, very prepared. Nan has been absolutely fabulous because at no time did she say, you have to go this way. She provided us choices, well-explained choices that we could decide what works for Woodstock. And everybody who is on the committee, as we said, Jeff and Michael and Richard is there and Judy. So it's been quite the journey, and it's been a thoughtful process. It hasn't been whip this thing out here. It's been a long process. It's been a 2-year process to get from the start to here. And it's been, I think they're very thoughtful, but I think well directed by Kirk and Deborah who have led us. And thank you also to the Housing Committee. I see Uranus here and others, because they really started this. They started to say, they got formed as a result of the comprehensive plan. They said we need a multi-prong approach to help housing in Woodstock. The zoning update is only one of the multi-prongs, and the Housing Committee is still working on the other thoughts. But it's a whole big journey, and it's exciting to be making this step.
And also that we're, because of the Housing Committee's work, we're members, and the town board, we joined the Housing Smart Communities program of the county. And so part of that is going to be a housing action plan. One of the actions is adopting housing zoning update. And so we're on our way to achieving that.
I just want to mention too, we did a housing committee for about almost 2 years, 9 to 11 months, or about a year and some time. We did a lot of research and followed every lead. And when we talk about zoning, there's a lot of solutions in cities, but not as many solutions in rural areas. And the thing about Nan and what Nan Stolzenberg brought is that she had a lot of experience with rural country areas and is a consultant professional that knows how to do all this. So that's a big part of why Dan is super important to have come and helped us with this and that.
Thank you, Urena. Dan, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming down.
No problem.
And with that, I'm going to move on to a couple of resolutions. Thank you, guys. And look forward to the continued journey. Whereas Allison's Restaurant, 51 Tinker Street, Woodstock, New York, 12498 is in compliance with the Alcohol Beverage Control Law, Section 64, Subdivision 2A, has notified its municipality of their intent to file application for an on-premises liquor license with New York State Liquor Authority, and whereas the property is currently in compliance with all local laws and does not have any violations at this time, therefore be it resolved to waive, in this instance, the 30-day period to review said application and consent to the issuing of a liquor license to the above named applicants.
Second,
I have a quick question about that.
Sure.
Allison's Restaurant, we know who bought the establishment, but who is Allison's Restaurant? Like, do we know anything about them?
No, I thought you said you knew them.
No,
Okay.
no, I don't know them. I was just questioning who they were. So I have no idea.
So our sole part in is to make sure that they're in compliance with all the local laws, zoning laws, and whatnot. And the building department has reviewed that and said they are in compliance. There are no issues there, no health department issues, so. Favor?
aye.
Aye. Did you guys?
Abstain.
Okay, therefore, excuse me, where CSAC has recommended the approval of the Shakespeare Stage Shed replacement, therefore be it resolved, the Woodstock Town Board approves the replacement of the existing shed with a similar new shed.
Second.
I have a question. So I guess I hadn't heard about this before. So this is, they're going to replace it. Is there any cost to the town?
No, the shed is actually out there. They had it was on sale, I guess, last fall, and they purchased it, and it's here, but it's not been placed. So no cost, they're paying for it. It's replacing the same size shed that was there. It's been reviewed by CSAC,
Sounds good.
and they recommend approval. So all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Public be heard. Michael Colbert,
I'm gonna pass tonight.
Okay.
Another night.
sure. And Julia.
Hi, my name is Julie Gallo. I'm Shady, and I'm part of this newly formed citizens group called Protect Our Water. And address the contaminated fill in Penchurch Road. And I have a request. I was going to give a little speech, but I decided to nix that because this was a very long meeting. And what I'd like is actually I'm asking to be put on the agenda, that this issue be put on the one of the next public meeting agendas, or we have a special meeting that's dedicated to this. Many people, including me, and especially the group that I represent, we have a lot of questions and concerns about what's happening up there. And we feel like it's very imperative that there's a public forum to be able to discuss these issues. So.
Wonderful. Give me a call tomorrow at the office. And we can
No,
talk about
I
it.
don't want, I want.
We can talk about setting something.
I don't want,
Okay.
I want a decision to be made now,
Okay.
that, like, if somebody, how do you do this? Somebody.
So two people have to, from the board, recommend that we do this and put it on the agenda.
Yeah.
And then, once two people do make a recommendation like that, then the supervisor finds a time to put it on the agenda. It's up to the supervisor to find the time to put it on the agenda, but all five of the board can agree to put an issue on the agenda.
So
Or,
could we do that now?
well, I mean, I certainly want this on the agenda.
I would second that as well.
Okay.
So can we vote?
Perfect.
So that
There's no vote.
you don't need a vote. Now the supervisor knows that there are two members that want it on the agenda. And so it's incumbent on the supervisor to find a time to put it on the agenda.
Excellent.
So Bill, could we put that on the agenda?
Yep.
And what do you think about timing?
Let me look at my next agenda and the one after that, and I'll get back to you.
I plan to call you tomorrow so that you could work out.
Yeah.
But we've been talking about this for 2 years. I know, but
Okay,
it's not
but actually, I have two. So with that, motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.